an exclusive interview where the Ravens can improve and AFC North talk. We talk about it all next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're back diving into yet another week of Baltimore Ravens talking here today. We have a very special episode, a very special first segment, as I had the opportunity and the pleasure to interview Baltimore Ravens offensive tackle, all-pro offensive tackle in Ronnie Stanley. You know, a big thank you to Ronnie for taking the time to talk to me. A big thank you to Rock Nation and to the Ravens and everybody involved with setting this up. It's a little crossover action, right, between Locked On Ravens and the Ravens. So pretty funny there. But yeah, it was great talking with Ronnie. We talk about his time with the Ravens, his podcasting experience, and also his foundation, which is doing so many great things in the community. So we'll have that in the first segment. In the second segment, I do want to talk about areas where the Ravens can improve. You know, every team, regardless of who they are, has areas where they can get better, and the Ravens are no exception to that. They've been very resilient going through their injuries, but they have big goals and big aspirations, and they can improve in some areas to really get to those goals and reach them. So we'll talk about that in the second segment. And finally, we're going to talk about the AFC North in the final segment, because what a division it has turned out to be with these teams. And I just want to talk about where every team stands and also why I still think the Ravens have the best shot to come out on top of the division and win the AFC North crown. So with all that being said, we are going to dive into it all here. Before we do that, though, be sure to follow the show. If you're in audio form following along on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, our content comes out Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're following along with us here on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It does help out a lot. I appreciate it. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter at ChaosStriker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So with all that being said, we'll dive into our interview with Ronnie Stanley of the Baltimore Ravens. And now joining me here on the show is a very special guest in Baltimore Ravens offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley. Ronnie, I appreciate you taking the time out here to talk with me about the Ravens, also a very important cause to you. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, and I wanted to start off here with a few questions about the team you play for in the Ravens, just what it's like to play for an organization like them. I think we've heard it so many times from current players, former players, the culture that goes on within that organization, how well they treat their players, the camaraderie between teammates, and just everybody getting along super well. So what's it like playing for an organization like the Ravens from both a culture perspective and on the field?
It's a real blessing. It definitely starts with Steve Bisciotti and um, him and truly investing in the team and wanting to win and investing in his players, like you said, every year. And then it goes to just the way they go about picking their players, from the start of the organization, to now. They pick great guys, high character guys, and also, phenomenal athletes. And I think that's what really has led to the culture that you see, in Baltimore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Steve Bisciotti's done a great job with that organization, also picking their players, as you talked about. One of those players who seems to be the talk of town every single week is your quarterback in Lamar Jackson. What's it like playing with a player like that who is such a great football talent on the field, but also off of it? I mean, it's such a phenomenal person and a phenomenal character.
I think it's great. I think, it's some of the most fun I had playing football, playing with a guy like that, and he's just a great football player, but even more, making it better is just, he's a great person.
Yeah, he absolutely is both on and off the field. But Ronnie, I want to go back with you a little bit to around your rookie season. Heading into the NFL, you were a very high draft pick, obviously. And I know sometimes with rookies heading into the league, there can be some expectations about the NFL that maybe just aren't the same when you get there, whether it's with a training camp or a preseason, a regular season game. Were there any stories like that that you have where maybe something wasn't as you expected as you got to the NFL and kind of learned about it?
Um, yeah, I think just, the sheer amount of recovery you really need in the NFL comparative to college, just how much you need to invest in your body, and especially if you're a starter and you're playing, a lot of snaps. that's definitely, one thing that I had to learn.
Yeah, and I definitely understand that. And talking about your rookie season too, did you have a welcome to the NFL moment? I know so many people talk about, their welcome to the NFL moments, and there are some funny stories behind them. Sometimes it's just a big hit or something like that. Did you have that moment?
Um, I don't know if I had that moment, but I think my moment, the moment for me was just lining up against Terrell Suggs and just looking across and just knowing, Terrell Suggs was lined up across from me. So I think that was kind of a surreal moment for me, but that kind of made it easier to go into games, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually leads me right into my next question, which is what's it like practicing against such a talented defense each and every week, kind of iron sharpening iron, because you have so many talented players on that defense. I would think it would help you heading into game day.
Oh yeah, definitely, going against our defense, we're definitely gonna, you know, play against the best players and we're gonna get the a great look, every single time. So it's good to be able to have those players to, we push each other and we, like you said, with our culture, we're just there trying to make each other better. And at the end of the day, we know we can still be bros at the end of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And speaking of some of your bros, I know Marshall Yanda had such a big impact on this team when he was with the Ravens. Could you talk a bit about him and the impact he had on you in your career?
Yeah, I thought Marshall was just a phenomenal leader, and I think he was a great person just to look to. For me, it was how he handled himself during games, I guess, and practice, and just the way he went about things. And I think uh, he was a great mentor to a lot of the interior linemen. Um, but for me, it was just the way he went about things and his his way, his ways.
Yeah, the Ravens do, I think, a great job of really having veterans mentor some of the younger players and really showing them how, the NFL works. So I think that's great. And Ronnie, speaking of the offensive line, I don't think I could pass up this opportunity to ask you about Robert Hunt in the Ravens game against the Dolphins. You responded to that play and said, as a Raven, I hated that, but as an offensive lineman, I loved every second of it. Robert Hunt obviously almost scoring a touchdown. He was ineligible. Have you ever thought about at the NFL level getting that football going into the end zone and scoring a touchdown as an offensive lineman?
Oh, 100%. I think about that all the time, just in case. I bet Robert Hunt thought about that too, just in case that moment comes, you got to be ready. And you can tell when he caught that ball, he didn't hesitate. He was ready. So he's definitely thought about that moment before because if that was me, I would have done the same thing. I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have just went for it. So because I've thought about it before, so I know he's thought about it. And at the end of the day, I knew that play wasn't going to count. As soon as it happened, I knew it wasn't going to count. But I was still happy to see, it unfold.
Yeah, the offensive linemen, man, they deserve the football. I'm hoping your time is coming soon with that because it'll be nice to see you get in the end zone, definitely. But also, as I'm sitting here, Ronnie, you're a podcast host yourself. We're talking here on Locked On Ravens. You have a podcast with the team at Marlon Humphrey, the Guru Punch podcast. How has the podcasting experience been for you in doing that with him?
It's good. It's a learning experience. I think we're still in the process of, ironing things out and really getting it, to look the way we want it to look. But for the most part, I think like our content, just us talking, I think that's been good. I think we have good chemistry and we enjoy talking to each other and having guests on, and it's been a good experience so far.
Yeah, definitely high quality content over there on the Guru Punch podcast. I have to agree with you. But Ronnie, I want to talk to you about your foundation now, something that is very important to me and obviously very important to you, the cause, the Ronnie Stanley Foundation, helping rescues. I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing. Could you kind of go into detail about what exactly your foundation is doing and working with and what the goals are of it?
Yeah, so my foundation and Ronnie Stanley Foundation, the whole concept is pretty much to take sheltered dogs that have been, neglected, abused, uh, bring them into a training facility with our partner trainers and to get these dogs trained, whether it just be basic training or more intensive training, trying to see if some of our dogs could turn into actual service dogs as well, which is a little bit tougher, but still exploring those options. And then bringing them into um, pretty much society into families that have someone in the family, or if it's a single adult, that is dealing with something that, maybe emotional or physically, that is weighing them down, or, that they need help and they would like a dog, a pet, but they couldn't, really support training one, or the food and vet bills and stuff. So the whole process is just to link animals with humans and kind of show how, both species can kind of help each other get through, different things. So, you know, the first recipient of the foundation was a little girl with sickle cell, and she's loving the dog. It's helped her a lot through, just anytime she gets sad or upset or anything like that. The dog's always been there for her, and it's been great for both the dog and her. And then our last recipient has been a veteran, and he has PTSD, and that dog has been helping him as well, emotionally, just get through things and just take it a day at a time. And I think it's a great way to help both humans and animals and show how both species, if done the right way, can do great things.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing, this foundation. I think you're doing a great thing. And Ronnie, I did want to ask about just what pet adoption means to you and finding homes for these animals, because I understand that you have 3 dogs of your own and they mean a lot to you.
Yeah, I think pet adoption is like a big thing. I think overbreeding and is a huge thing. One of my dogs is overbred. Uh, I think it can be an abusive process. There's not many rules around it, and I think people just kind of look at it as like, a money hungry scheme, and they don't really care about the animals, and then that's why you kind of have these shelters that are over, capacity. Um, I just think it's kind of a disservice to, the animals that we kind of turned into pets over, thousands of years, so.
Yeah, no, I do agree. And Ronnie, was there a moment where, you had the idea for this foundation? Was it maybe adopting your first dog, or a different moment where you kind of thought, this is what I want to do and this is the cause I want to help?
I think the idea just kind of came to me like when I was in the car or something. Yeah, just I think random ideas just kind of flow through my head, and that was one of them.
Sometimes the car can provide the best idea. So that's a good twist on that. But Ronnie, if people want to learn more about your foundation and help and find it on social media, are there any places where they can do that?
Yep, Ronnie Stanley Foundation .com, I believe, is the website. Ronnie Stanley Foundation on Instagram as well, or I think it's Ronnie's Foundation. And you'll see the handprint with the paw in the middle, and that's how you'll know it's mine.
Yep. So if anybody does want to learn more, find out more, follow on social media, Ronnie's Foundation on Instagram, and also ronniesfoundation.org, just as the actual website. But Ronnie, that's all I have for you. I really appreciate you taking your time here, coming on with me and talking about the Ravens in your foundation, and I wish you the best of luck.
All right, I appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you.
Again, a big, big thank you to Ronnie Stanley and to Rock Nation, the Ravens, everybody involved for making this happen. It was so fun talking with Ronnie. And, I do think I would like to see Ronnie Stanley get into that end zone. I think a lot of people would like to see him get in the end zone. I am definitely team get Ronnie Stanley in that end zone with the football, get him a touchdown at the NFL level. But again, a big thank you to everybody involved. We're going to head into our first break. When we get back, we'll be diving into just some areas where the Ravens can improve heading out of that Week 10 loss to Miami. So stay tuned for that. And we will be right back. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friends login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Streaming. It brings you live and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. We returned here. It's our second segment of this Monday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here. And we just got into the full interview that I did with Ravens offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley. A really great time talking with him. But Now let's get into some areas for improvement for this Baltimore Ravens team. And as I kind of talked about in the intro, no NFL team is perfect, right? I think with just the expectations and just with how great of a franchise the Ravens are, a lot of people expect perfection or at least very close to it. And the reality is what the Ravens have done this season is very impressive in terms of the injuries they've had to go through, the combinations they've had to work with. But they have bigger goals than just being resilient and just, stringing together a few wins and then having some pretty brutal losses. They want to get to the top. They want to reach a Super Bowl, win a championship. And in order to do that, they do have to improve in a couple of areas. And I think it does start with the running game. Now, the Ravens running game has been very up and down. And look, I don't think anybody was expecting the run game to be the same after losing J.K. Dobbins and after losing Gus Edwards. It's just, those are guys you really can't replace. I expected J.K. Dobbins to have a monster second year with the Ravens. And Gus Edwards is added to his game, and every single year really came into the league out of Rutgers is, that north-south runner, and then added in some cutback ability, some east-west stuff, and then you saw him add in the receiving chops, and, he was also poised for a big year. So what did the Ravens do? They bring in Latavius Murray, and they bring in Devonta Freeman, Le'Veon Bell, they have Tyson Williams, and it just hasn't been the same. Now, they've been trying to, I think, use Latavius Murray more in like the Gus Edwards role. They're similar builds and whatnot. Devonta Freeman was getting more of the Justice Hill role, but I think he is now the number one back on this team. And I think it will probably be like 1A, 1B when Latavius Murray is healthy enough to return. We don't know when that is yet, but people want explosiveness. I think it's just the explosiveness people are missing out of this offense, or at least the rushing offense. And I'm not putting all the blame on the running backs. I'm not putting all the blame on the offensive line. It's a combination of both, and both positions have gone through a ton of injury this season. But what I do like, and what is actually really interesting to me, is I know that when you look at the Ravens and what they have been over these past couple of seasons, it's been the rushing offense that has, carried them. The passing offense has been there, but it hasn't been as explosive as we've seen it be this year. And I know a lot of people think, what? Well, the Ravens always are going to run the ball more than they pass it. And, by the time the year is out, they're definitely going to have more rushes than more passes, regardless of how or who the running backs are. Well, if we go back here, I'll pull up the stats. If we go back to 2020, the Ravens, over the course of the full 16-game season, threw 596 passes and ran it 382 times. So passing offenses, when you get the big passing offenses, the high-powered ones and the high-volume ones like Pittsburgh and Kansas City, you're seeing those numbers really skewed towards, all right, they're passing the football 400 more times or whatever you want to say. The Ravens only about, around 200 more times throwing the football. But now we're going to this season, and this obviously, the season's not over yet. There's also an extra game. But through 10 weeks, the Ravens have thrown the football 331 times and rushed the football 191 times. So they're still running the football, and they still want to do it at a high level. And there have been the games where they do it at a high level. But the issue is that most of their rushing offense right now does come by the way of Lamar Jackson. And I want to say also, Devonta Freeman's looked a lot better to me in recent weeks. I know it was a bit of a slow start, but again, as I've talked about, this really wasn't like the Ravens had like 2 months to get these guys acclimated to the offense. The injuries happened with like 10 days before the regular season. They had to get everybody up to speed. So I think we're now seeing those results from a player like Freeman, but it just seems like Le'Veon Bell, he's gotten some run, but he hasn't really made a lot of big plays so far. He scored a couple touchdowns, looked good on a couple runs, but the explosiveness just, it's not there for him right now. They're not really giving Tyson Williams a chance right now. A lot of people are kind of clamoring for Tyson Williams to get some more carries. I could see it, definitely, but then you have to run into the problem of who you making inactive. Is it Le'Veon Bell? Has Le'Veon Bell kind of worn out that welcome of, right, we're going to see what you can do? But that is an area where the Ravens need to improve because it has made the Ravens kind of a one-dimensional offense. Now, looking at the actual stats for the Ravens, I mean, this is a team that, in terms of pure team stats and what they have done this season as a rushing offense, they're tops in the league. They have the second most yards in the league right now. They are currently ranked fourth in yards per attempt. So, they're averaging 4.9 yards per attempt, but that's not necessarily the big issue. The big issue is what's happening outside of Lamar Jackson in the run game. And it's not a ton. The trade deadline's passed. They're rolling with their guys. There's not really a player they can sign right now, at least in my opinion. That whole thing would just be the same problem that the Ravens had in the beginning of the year, which was they have to get guys up to speed, work on the mesh point. So they have areas there, but, this is what they're working with right now. And there's an area that the Ravens do have to improve in. But for me, a lot of the offense, at least all the offense, really starts up front. It's the offensive line. And kind of like the running back situation, you're not really going to get a full complement of what this offensive line can be without players like Ronnie Stanley on it and without Patrick McCarry in there, because we saw what he was able to do. So you're looking at a team that for weeks, really ever since week one, has been shuffling in combinations, moving guys here, moving guys there. There's been very little consistency. And one of the things I talked about in the offseason was the consistency of getting as many guys in their set positions as possible and having them play for as long as possible together. And they haven't really had that this season. They have Kevin Zeitler, who's played at right guard consistently. Bradley Bozeman has been in at center, but the left tackle position has been mostly Alejandro Villanueva. But after he was training to move over to the right side all offseason, and not saying he can't play left tackle. I mean, he did it for years and years in Pittsburgh. But, it's just that having to go from the right side or from the left side to the right side, then back to the left side. And then McCarry, kind of, you get that consistency, and then all of a sudden it's taken away. You have to move Tyree Phillips in there. Left guard has been Ben Powers, Ben Cleveland. Tyree Phillips has been everybody. So that in turn is really, I think, messed up a lot of the consistency that some offensive lines, you go back to the really early offseason, they've been working with the same five guys, or at least a lot of the same guys since then. So it's different. But again, injuries, when the Ravens are looking to make a Super Bowl run, they have to overcome them. And they've done a decently good job so far. We'll talk about their 6-3 AFC North leading record in the final segment. But it's things like that where right now we know this offensive line is not playing in tip-top shape. They're very inconsistent. We see quarters where it's great and everybody's blocking well, run lanes are open, Lamar Jackson has time, and then we see other quarters or halves or even full games where it's just Lamar Jackson's under pressure, he's trying to escape. And regardless of how good a quarterback is, how good a running back is, if there is a defensive lineman or a defender in the backfield within 1 second of a snap, there's not a lot anybody can do with that, regardless of if you have Lamar Jackson or a non-mobile great quarterback like Tom Brady, for example. Lamar Jackson can make some stuff happen, but if there's a guy right in his face right at the start of a play, how many times is he going to be able to get a good ball off? Probably not a lot. That's an area I think Baltimore really does have to improve on the offensive side of the ball as well. I mean, obviously the fast starts are a big concern, or I guess the lack of fast starts are a big concern. Baltimore moves the football, gains over 90 yards on their first 2 drives combined against the Dolphins, only gets 3 points out of it. That's a big concern because we've seen it over the course of the season, and it can be such a big game changer, whether in a positive or negative way, however you want to look at it, because this team is just so built, I think, on establishing a lead and keeping it. But at the same time, here's what we've seen. We've seen the Ravens be able to come back and come back from behind. That's also now a big part of their identity. So now not only can they hold a lead, but also if they do get down and their fast start doesn't really come, they can come back from behind. It's the best of both worlds, right? Well, you'd much rather have the lead. You'd much rather protect the lead as well as, just being able to control the clock as opposed to coming back from a deficit. And I think the Ravens were playing with fire for a lot of it. They got some really nice comeback wins, and credit to them. Just because they're comeback wins doesn't mean they're not wins or not impressive. But against Miami, they just can't get anything going. And then all of a sudden, the Dolphins have that fumble recovery touchdown. The Ravens score, then the defense gives up the big play. And it's just, that's not the way to win football games. Getting off to a fast start would help them tremendously. And then speaking of the defense, the big plays. I mean, the Ravens have been one of the worst big play defenses in the NFL in terms of giving them up. We saw the Ravens play a really good defensive game on Thursday night against Miami, but in the big moments, right before the half, right when the Ravens get them runs with a touchdown, they just could not really hold together. The couple of big miscommunications. I think this was maybe a bit of missing Deshaun Elliott and having a rookie in there and Brandon Stevens. We saw that, I think, a tiny bit on those 2 big plays. But again, next man up mentality. I understand how hurt this team is. I understand how impressive they've been. But in order to reach that goal, they have to work with the guys that they have in that next man up mentality. And also the tackles. I thought the Ravens did tackle better, both against Minnesota and against Miami. There were a few missed tackles against Miami. I know Josh Bynes had one he'd like to have back and a couple others. But these are all areas that the Ravens, if they just elevate their game a little bit and be just a bit more consistent, they have a chance, especially with this back half of their schedule coming up, which we will talk about. It's going to be so huge and could be so huge for them. If they can improve just a little tiny bit in each of those areas, I think they could string together a really big win streak over these next, obviously hopefully starting in Chicago and then moving on to Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and whatnot. But it's going to be really big and really interesting to see if this Ravens team can stay resilient. I think they can. This coaching staff, I think, will have their players ready against Chicago. And that this is a learning experience, a learning game for them. And I think that Baltimore will be ready for Chicago in week 11. We'll head to our final break, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into the AFC North and talking about just the division. So stay tuned for that. And we will be right back. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. If you haven't tried a Built Bar by now, you're missing out. They say it's a protein bar, but it does not taste like one. You have to try one of these amazing bars yourself to believe it. Most protein bars are chalky or waxy or just plain hard to choke down. A Built Bar is soft, covered in 100% real chocolate, and when you bite into it, you know you're eating something different. It's more of an experience, one that you'll enjoy. In fact, you'd swear you're eating a candy bar. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, baseball, postseason, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet online where the game starts. We return here. It's our final segment of this Monday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstreicher, your host, still talking with you here. And let's dive into this AFC North because what a division. What a division it is this year. And I don't necessarily mean that in a great, oh my God, look at all these teams that are playing so well. Week 10 was probably the worst week in the division so far this season. Baltimore, obviously, with that really disappointing loss to the Dolphins in week 10. Then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have a real opportunity to move into first place and have that 6-3 record, much like Baltimore. And what do? They tie against the winless Lions 16-16 in a game that, oh my God, it was just one of the sloppiest games I think I've ever seen. That kick, the Lions kicker, I think it's the second worst kick I've ever seen. The worst kick I've ever seen. It's a Ravens kick, and I probably will upset some people if I say the name of the person, but I'm going to say it anyway. Billy Cundiff. I think that's the worst that I've seen, just hooking all the way to the left. But yeah, this Lions kicker could not do it. Then the fumbles, and yeah, it was just brutal. But the Steelers tying the Lions. Then the Cleveland Browns, I mean, they get destroyed. They get destroyed by the New England Patriots, and Baker Mayfield goes down with an injury. Hopefully he's okay. Also, TJ Watt went down with an injury in the Steelers game, so hopefully he's okay as well. But this is a division now, and obviously Cincinnati had their bye, just disclaimer there. This is a division that has a lot of talent in it, a lot of talented teams, but it really is, they go as far as certain players take them. The Ravens go as far as Lamar Jackson takes them. I mean, that's pretty obvious. They have talent that can mask some of the bad games Jackson has, but, without Lamar Jackson, how good is his football team? I'm not so sure. Jackson is an electric talent, and of course, he is going to be the key to this Ravens team, but it's almost like this Ravens offense, this Ravens defense, the Ravens team in general, they have a star at the quarterback position in Lamar Jackson. They have other stars too. I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, you have Marlon Humphrey, Calais Campbell. You have a bunch of different really talented players, but for every team, you have a couple of those stars that are really just like if they go out or if they're not playing well, it really impacts the rest of the team. And with the Ravens, it can be Lamar Jackson if he's struggling. And part of that can be the offensive line, as we talked about in the second segment. For Pittsburgh, it's obvious as far as Ben Roethlisberger can take them. That defense is still good. Mike Tomlin's still a really good coach, but Mason Rudolph, I do not think is the answer there in Pittsburgh, unfortunately for them. So, with him going on the COVID list late, Mason Rudolph could not get the job done against Detroit. They don't lose, but they don't win either. So I think that's really all right as far as Ben Roethlisberger takes them, even though they have the defense and they have the coach who's really good as well. The Bengals, they have a lot of young talent. It's a question for me of experience. They're super, super young, and they also have had a couple of bad losses back to back, after beating Baltimore, kind of having that be a huge statement to the league, statement to the world. They lose to the Jets, they lose to the Browns in pretty bad fashion. They lose a close one to the Jets, get blown out by the Browns, and I think the inexperience is showing. Their defense also has a lot of holes in it. I think they played a really good game against Baltimore, but overall, I think we're seeing the defense does have a few holes. And then also with the Browns, it's just injuries. I mean, they're a very talented roster. The defense also still has a couple holes. Joe Woods, I think, has been getting a lot of flack from that Browns fan base about what he's been doing there. The injuries there, is there any drama from the Odell Beckham situation that still hung over there, right? Is that kind of still in the air? We don't really know. They're questioning over there, is Baker Mayfield the guy? And it's a big question they'll have to answer and give him a contract extension if they feel it, and maybe let him walk in a surprising fashion if they don't. So many talented teams, so much talent, but so many just question marks, I think. And I think that's why the Ravens have the opportunity to continue to, I guess, build. And obviously they didn't really build a lot against Miami, but this is a stretch now. They're heading into it, this week 12 through 18, where they're going to have a lot of tough opponents on the docket. They have Cleveland twice. They have Pittsburgh twice. They have Cincinnati one more time. They have Los Angeles, the Rams, and they have the Packers. No particular order there. I'm just listing out opponents, but that's tough. I mean, those are all very quality teams. And, they have their strengths, they have their weaknesses and whatever. But, the Ravens had an opportunity in weeks 9, 10, and 11 to go 3-0 to kind of get a little bit more of a grip, but more of a hold on the division. And they beat the Vikings. They had to come back for that victory. They lose to the Dolphins. They're 1-1 in the game that arguably they couldn't lose in that stretch. They did lose against the Dolphins because it's an AFC opponent. Now, I think division record is going to be huge for the Ravens. Right now they've only played one division game. They're 0-1. If they can come out of their next 5 or their last 5 divisional games, if they can have 4-1, a 4-1 record, so they win 4, they lose 1. I'm predicting a loss to Cleveland in week 14. That's my one loss, I'd say. I think they beat Pittsburgh twice. I think they get revenge on Cincinnati in Cincinnati, and then I think they win the first game in week 12. If they can do that, I think they're in good shape. I really do, because I think they will beat Chicago. I think Green Bay and Los Angeles are a bit iffy. It is iffy. I could see them losing both of those games. So in that world, let's say the Ravens lose to Cleveland, they lose to the Rams, and they lose to the Packers. I think that's more than enough for this division. And even, maybe a top 3 seed in the AFC, because the AFC, we're talking about the AFC North, but the AFC in general is so weird. It's unbelievably weird this season. And my kind of diagnosis of it is, for the AFC versus the NFC, the NFC has a lot more top-end talent, where you see more of a fall off a cliff when you get down to the lower seeds of the playoffs, where there are 6 or 7 really, really good teams in the NFC, and then there's just a huge talent drop-off, a huge record drop-off. For the AFC, it's a lot more balanced. There isn't a ton of top-end necessarily talent. There are probably 4 or 5 teams I could say, hey, are really top-end teams. But even right now, how many teams in the AFC can you say are top-end? I mean, Tennessee is leading the division, or is leading the conference right now. Is Baltimore a top talent team? Kansas City's been struggling. The Bills, they seem to be one of those teams as well. The Browns, the Chargers, right? It's balanced out, where there's not necessarily 7 or 8 top dogs or anything this season, but they have a lot of talent that's just more balanced out, and there's not as much of a steep drop-off when you hit the lower seeds. So that could be a really big opening for the Ravens, because it's not necessarily they're competing for a playoff spot or a wild card berth. This is a playoff team 100% for me. I'd be very, very shocked if they didn't make the playoffs. They're too good of a team. They have too much talent. I think the coaching staff is too good for that to happen, for them to completely collapse this year. Now, the only way I can see that happening, a full collapse for this team, injuries. If they just can't overcome the injuries. And I said it before the year started with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Marcus Peters. I said it before the season, where injuries are going to be a storyline. They're going to be a big part of what this season is for the Ravens, regardless of how well or how not well they do. It's either if they were able to overcome the injuries or they weren't able to overcome the injuries. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just what it is. But with everybody else going through their struggles, with everybody else having a couple of injuries of their own, with teams not really knowing, who's going to come to play one week and who's going to come to play the next week. Right? Miami was one of the worst teams in the NFL coming into week 10. And what did they do? They ran the Ravens out of Miami. I mean, they did. So big credit to them, big props. I don't want to discredit what Miami did, but Baltimore just didn't show up to play on the offensive side of the ball, and that's what ended up happening. So with all these good teams coming into town for Baltimore, and they have to go play these good teams, it's concerning, right? You look at the Ravens and how they struggled against Miami, have to have these comeback wins, but I'm still confident. There's ways they can improve. This isn't a perfect football team, but I still think this is absolutely a playoff team. I think they still can win this division 100%, but now it's on them to continue to learn from their mistakes, to grow, and just be a better football team than they were in week 10. If they can do that, I think they'll be in decently good shape. That's all that I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens talk, so stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.